Beach.
Welcome to another episode of Wild and Well. Today I am joined by Shari Stamps to talk about taking care of our babies and ourselves postpartum. So, welcome, Shari. But before we get into this conversation, can you tell us one thing that you did today to nourish yourself or to take care of you?
Well, it's still morning, so after the craziness of school drop off, it's nourishing for me to take that moment of calm when I'm breastfeeding my baby, like getting her to sleep. So it's like breast sleep. Um, and it's one of my favorite things about kind of bed sharing and co-sleeping is I get to, it's like this built-in, you need to pause and take a break and slow down. And when you are a neurodivergent person with neurodivergent children and you're always in like a chronic stress state, um, it's immensely helpful and it's like a big piece of built-in self-care for me because I tend to um not always have my mindful mind on, even though, like later I'll be like, oh no, when you're in that kind of chronic stress state, you can't access your mindful mind sometimes because you're in a different state of mind. Um, so I'd say I did that, and it's just a good way to start your day, a good beneficial way to slow down before coming and talking, about important things.
Yeah, it's really nice when those self-care activities are just naturally built in or intentionally built into our lives, and they can include some of our kids like that. So it doesn't always have to be activities that are away from the kids or just like me time, because realistically, a lot of us don't have much of that time, and that's okay. So I love that it is built into feeding your baby. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah, and just like, babies co-regulate with us. In a sense, you also, because, I'm 9 months postpartum, but really, we know that postpartum is years and years. But sometimes, people don't realize you're also co-regulating with your baby because you're still a unit. Even 9 months out, you feed off their energy, they feed off yours. And so it's that regulation piece together. And sometimes I feel like I'm so in the thick of, okay, I have a baby and then I have this 3-year-old and then, all the little kids who always need my attention. So then every so often I'm like, okay, I really need to reach out to my teen and, I, need to get that, contact with her and give her a hug and remind her she's loved. And then also it's nice for me. It warms you as a parent when you get to hug your teen because they're not always like, around and in your face the way the little kids are. Um, and that regulates me too, because I might be overwhelmed with the younger kids. And then, okay, a nice little hug for my teen. Like I'm still doing something right somewhere, and that's regulating in a way too.
Yeah, absolutely. Those hugs are the best. And I imagine as they get older and they get less frequent, they're just that much more special.
Definitely.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do? Because it's really interesting what you do, and you have so many different trainings and ways of working with moms, like with families and with kids. So can you tell us about this?
Yes. So, I'm a wellness practitioner for families, is kind of the simple way of saying it. I will work with expecting mothers through the postpartum years. And I just really love working with babies, especially because they don't have a voice, that they can't speak to you about their birth story the way a mother can. And also, babies and mothers, they're so deeply connected, and there's so much that hasn't, I don't think it needs to be studied. It's like this should be common knowledge, but it isn't. And really, there's just more support that's needed there. Um, as a parent, I started this parenting website when my 14-year-old was a baby because originally came into all of this from an associate's degree in journalism and a bachelor's degree in creative writing, and I was like, I'm going to be a writer. And then I had her, I was like, I'm really going to focus on parenting. At the time, I was working at a website that focused on like celebrities and mostly on moms. And I was like, well, let's include both parents. And I don't want to talk about celebrities. I want helpful information. So I created a website and then was about to have my now 8-year-old. And I was like, I think we need more resources for parents more than like going to the hospital. At the time, it was you go to the hospital, usually it's an evening class. Mostly it's moms by themselves because only, one person was able to show up at that time, or they're there for with their mom, or, just there's a lot of missing stuff. And I'm like, well, if there isn't that support immediately where they're going to classes together and learning the same information, there's going to be stuff missing out later. So I trained as a birth doula while I was pregnant. I was like, this will help my pregnancy, and I can go from, place of, professionalism when creating this course for families. And from there, it kind of just dominoed. And I had a fast natural birth experience. I wound up in the ER after being discharged because I didn't know what was wrong with me. They had me there all day with a newborn. And they're like, well, you can't eat anything. And here I'm breastfeeding a newborn in the ER. Um, they did an internal ultrasound, not fun, immediately after giving birth. And all these things. And at the end of the day, they're like, well, these are just fast labor pains from having a very fast natural birth. And so after that, I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, why did it take these doctors all day to be able to tell me that? And how did I not, how is this so different from my other birth experience? And how did I not know any of this? And I wasn't prepared. This was back in 2017. So then I trained in postpartum, became a postpartum doula, and created what I think was the first ever to exist postpartum prep course. And I brought in a bunch of different experts and had them talk about their section because I didn't want to speak for all the different sections. Um, and from there, I trained in infant massage and mother warming and lactation. I became a lactation educator. Um, and then it just kept going. I would train in one thing and learn about something else. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's connected. I need this resource. The families I work with need this resource. Um, Craniosacral therapy was something that kept coming up because my own babies had oral ties, and I was helping families with oral ties. And locally, they would be like, you need to go to CST. But my families weren't seeing the benefit of it. And I wasn't seeing the benefit as a parent when I went to that CST. So it's interesting that now I'm a CST. But I was like, something's there. Everyone says it's important, but I'm just not connecting with that person. So down the line, I trained in craniosacral therapy and found how it really was the missing piece connecting everything. And it's amazing to understand it as a provider. And then I trained in myofunctional therapy, beak and airway and primitive reflexes, um, because my approach is really, oh, and baby led sleep and well-being. Because my approach is really, this is all connected. So anytime I see someone post on Facebook about, well, my supply dropped, I'm like, okay, well, this is actually, there's a body issue there. And we need to look at the oral function, and we need to look at feeding, and we need to look at the emotional side of things. We need to look at your birth and the trauma. Um, or people will be talking about how they need more sleep. And I'm like, well, let's look at airway. How is your baby breathing? And what is your routine? We don't need to change the baby. We need to change the environment around, in the ecosystem of the family. Your baby is perfect. So there's really all of these different modalities. They were in these different silos before. And I was like, no, these are all connected. They need to be connected. And so I've just been kind of learning more and more. Um, I think as someone I'm 40 and I'm just learning more about like ADD and things like that. And that fear of not being good enough or not knowing enough. And so, especially because, I'm not a doctor. So people are like, oh, you're not a doctor. But then we hear things like from Casey Means, or she went to Stanford for what, 9 years and didn't learn that the whole body is connected. And, and it makes you question a lot of things. Or pediatricians telling people they can, go ahead and give your baby solids at 4 months. That's fine. And start them with rice. Put rice cereal in the bottle. And, people still have their doctor telling them that. Um, so, I have to remind myself it's okay. You don't have $100,000 to go back to school and get a doctorate in something right now. I'm doing the best that I can with the information I have, which is what I try to tell parents. And I'm just learning as much as I can, any way I can every day. I'm like, oh, I have like 5 more courses to learn from, because I just don't want other parents to go through this. I wish I knew and find out 5 years later. And I'm also trying to lower the maternal mental health statistics just a little bit because I think that starts, well, we know it starts before pregnancy because you're more likely to have it if you already have history of depression, anxiety. Um, but also there's so much more emotional turmoil around so many of these pregnancies of these babies that come in and they're my clients. And so it really starts then. So I say postpartum starts before you give birth, and pregnancy doesn't end just because you gave birth. And we talk about that with mothering the mother and babying the mother. And we have that fourth trimester, and we talk about it so often, but people forget it's pretend you're a kangaroo. This baby, pretend they're still inside you. You have one more trimester. They're going to be clinging to you. You're going to be not used to it, and you're going to be forced to slow down and connect. And that's so hard because we have spent our lives as women being told to disconnect from ourselves and not take time for ourselves. And it's selfish or, you know, um, you're a self-centered, I don't know. Things like massages and a nice warm bath are like luxuries, and um, you're being, I don't know what the word I am looking for is, but materialistic. If you want a massage, when really it's a part of care. Egyptians would have massages all the time. It's a part of care, because our bodies need it. They need connection. They need that rehab time. And we need to honor our bodies and thank our bodies for this whole process. Sorry, that was a very long ramble. I'm gonna stop and let you talk for a minute.
It's fascinating how many different things that you did, so many different trainings, and I can totally understand that because I'm similar like that. I did my training in psychology, but I've done so many other trainings, and it's hard to just be siloed in one area because everything's connected. So I really appreciate that you are following your interests and what your family needs and the families that you work with need, and learning about those things and applying them and helping because that does create change. But why do you think it is that so many families are pretty unprepared for postpartum?
Well, it's strange to think that like even 60 years ago, capitalism in society was different. And like I'm just realizing now how the single use packaging and all the ads and everything of the 90s, like how it really shifted so much in the US specifically. I don't know about anywhere else. Um, and just thinking about that and the shift to needing these products to care for your baby, and people focusing so much on, well, I have to have this product or I can't parent correctly. I think it was last year I saw this product for sale that it was going to measure how much intake your breastfed baby got. So now we're putting numbers on how much a breastfed baby gets, which is my issue, my one of my concerns when there's a bottle feeding, unless there's concerns about weight and they have to measure all the feeds. I don't want parents to, it really instills a lot of anxiety when they're looking at the numbers instead of following, okay, this baby's hungry, they're not hungry, or okay, I'm only feeding you at 3 hours on the dot, no matter your hunger cues. We're not listening to this person who knows their body or your own instincts, and we're relying on this separate device saying it knows better than me. And there's been a huge shift towards that. Like, okay, we can talk about this new, you know, oh, okay, it's going to handle, jostling my baby, it knows better than me what to do for my baby in the middle of the night. Um, and so there has not been much education on what to prepare for and what to expect ahead of time, which is why I created the postpartum prep course back in 2017, because I was like, no one told me, it would be different postpartum from one postpartum to another. And a lot of people, it was really hard to market that to people because they were like, well, I already have babies. I know. And I was like, well, that's the whole point. No, you don't. Each baby's different, and each postpartum, each pregnancy experience is different, and each postpartum is different. And, if you didn't grow up seeing other people breastfeed or seeing, a home birth or a natural birth versus or a C-section, like you won't know what to expect. You won't know that there's the option of maybe what they call like a gentle cesarean. You don't know that you have all these different drape options and golden hour options. If someone doesn't tell you, you don't know what you don't know. Um, and so I think that's really the most difficult thing is we have that shift to the mindset of I need these products instead of I need this knowledge and giving people the knowledge. And I think that also ties into right now, I feel like I'm postpartum, but also perimenopause. And I'm like, why didn't they teach us about menopause when they did the period and the sex talks in school? Why? And right now, they're talking about in schools, they're expanding everything that they talk about, but they're still not informing girls, about what is to come. And that's imperative health knowledge. Like I grew up not knowing very much about my body whatsoever. And that's also a huge piece of this. We spend so much time about talking about, well, sex ed, but there's more to it than just like the penetration piece and the other stuff. There's the, hey, there's a baby and a pregnancy and a birth. Like, how about we prepare these people for that experience because they're left knowing nothing. Um, they might hear about a doula. They might hire one or might not. They might see the value. When I worked as a doula, I liked working postpartum because I had, smaller kids at the time and I bed share, like co-sleep and all that. So I couldn't just run to a birth, out of nowhere. But I also really liked connecting with the parents and helping them with the education and the support. So I worked daytime for people who don't know, there's daytime and nighttime doulas. And then even within nighttime doulas, there's the kind who will stay awake and the kind who will sleep when baby sleeps. There's like a whole range of different types of doulas. But I really liked being a daytime doula for that support piece. And I'm losing my train of thought. Um, so because they weren't educated on a lot of things. And so I would provide that education. But even with that, and helping parents to not feel isolated, going with them to local community appointments, helping them go in the car for the first time with a baby, scary, right? Things like that. They would then come to me like, uh, any way you could charge less? I don't think I can pay you this much. And then they would go order like the most expensive stroller. And it really is like, so you see more value in this product than you do the support for your postpartum period, which is going to shape the next 40 plus years of your life. Um, and the other reason menopause and perimenopause is connected is you get a glimpse of what that's like when you're postpartum. Another thing they don't tell us about. And then if you try to rush to your old self instead of taking care of yourself, you are affecting that 70, 80-year-old self and any incontinence or prolapses or things you might have. Because you're like, no, I need to go back to running. No, my partner isn't going to be happy with me if I don't do things for them. We put all these other people before us because we have to do this, we have to do that. And that needs to be a very important talk that is had long before pregnancy.
Yeah, it's really all about those. the society and the capitalism and the culture that we live in that is impacting on making postpartum a lot harder than it needs to be and ill preparing us. Even when you think about baby showers, 99% of the presents are like objects like clothes or strollers or just different things that most of it isn't necessary at all. But very rarely do you see anything in there for mums. It's it's all about like products and stuff, and then people feel prepared, but that doesn't prepare us for what's to come, does it?
No, and I do registry consults and I try to, it's funny because some people, experienced parents will tell other parents, you need barely anything. But when I do the registry consult, it's like you actually do need a lot, but it's not the things you need. It's not the crib. Don't bother with the crib. Whether you think you're going to use one or not, that baby will be in room with you. Even the, American Academy of Pediatrics says at least the first year to prevent SIDS, right? You need to be near your baby, so be prepared for that. Um, and yeah, you don't need a bunch of clothes, but unfortunately, whether you have a registry or not, there's always family or friends who don't even look at your registry and all they get is clothes because they like to. And it's a gift. So it's like you can't expect certain things because that's the whole point of gifts, right? But I tell people, keep the tags on. Don't wash everything. You may end up washing the same three outfits and putting them on baby. So you don't want to wash preparing for a birth is not getting the crib set up and the nursery painted. Not only do we not want to put a baby in a room that was just painted, even if it is the zero VOC air purifying paint, which I have tried, it's wonderful. Um, we don't want to wash all the clothes. Like, I know that you want to put your nesting energy in something, but it should be on making sure you have food. It should be on making sure someone's cleaning the house that is not you and not your partner. It should be on ensuring you have a whole care support system. Now, this may not be friends and family coming over to take care of you, and that's something that a lot of people talk about. Like, where's this village that, we talk about? Okay, in different cultures and countries, they have this built in. It's a part of the culture. In the US, this is not the culture. You have to hire your care team. So I want you to know this in advance. Interview and hire your doulas. Um, Understand that they may discontinue service if they feel it's not a safe space or if you talk rudely to them. Everyone has their limits of things, so you need to make sure you're a match with them and they're a match with you. Do not feel uncomfortable asking any questions because this person is going to be in your close personal space after you've given birth when you're in your most vulnerable time. Um, and you need to be comfortable telling them, hey, I don't like how you're doing that, or could you please do this, and not act like they're a guest in your home that you need to then please when you're again in this vulnerable time when you just need to heal and feel like you're taken care of. Um, that can include a pediatric dentist, which a lot of people don't think of, your pediatrician, licensed therapist who is trained in perinatal mental health. That's a big thing because unfortunately there are not enough people trained in this area. I know one of my postpartums I went to see, I have Kaiser. I went to see somebody and they're like, well, make sure you get sleep and you eat well and you get out and exercise. I was like, wow, thank you. I'm so glad I poured everything out to you. I bared it all and I feel very embarrassed bearing all of this to this man just for him to tell me the most basic information I already knew. Thank you for that. And it made me feel worse. And then I know sometimes there can be months and months wait for a lot of these appointments. Again, Kaiser, they make you make an appointment to then call them and make an appointment. And then the appointment for that actual appointment is a month or so out. And each time you have to bear yourself with this information. And making that first phone call is so hard for parents. I also volunteered for Postpartum Support International for a little bit, and I would help them find these resources. So I know hearing from them too, these parents, it is such a big step to make that phone call. So then to have this blockade of, oh, but you need to do this, this, and this, and all these hoops, it's so hard. Um, so that support team also includes community resources and groups like Postpartum Support International, or maybe you have a local postpartum group, even if you're not breastfeeding. If there's they might call it a lactation group, you can go there with your formula. You can go there with your pumped breast milk, which is also considered breastfeeding. You can, whatever, however you feed, you can go and have that community. Um, because sometimes, like I said, it can take a while to get that other visit, and you need support in the meantime, virtual or in person. That includes a craniosacral therapist. Um, and, there's so many pieces to your care team, and it's really important that you build that in advance. And your pelvic floor physical therapist. Again, depending on where you have a doctor, or depending on your insurance, they might be like, we don't do that. Like, Kaiser, you can't see a pelvic floor PT when you're pregnant, even though it's really important and can improve your birth. So you have to wait till you're postpartum. So that's definitely something you need to look at, and it might be out of network for you before you conceive or when you're pregnant and then after. Something that a lot of people don't realize is your mouth is really important for your birth as well, and it's connected to your pelvic health. So, if you tend to have TMJ or migraines or headaches, or you might have a twisted pelvis or all these other things, go see a craniosacral therapist and maybe look into myofunctional therapy. And improving your mouth and your breathing and your posture will improve your birth, improve your baby's head shape, improve baby's development later because they didn't have all this extra trauma happening with how they're held in your pelvis during pregnancy and then how they were kind of jostled around or stuck during the birth experience.
So can you tell us more about craniosacral therapy? I have experienced this, and it was part of a massage that I got for, gosh, I probably did it for about 6 months. But I'm still fascinated by it, and for the life of me, could not explain what it is. So can you tell us a bit about this?
Yes, so we know that we have muscles throughout our body and bones, but then we also have fascia, which kind of looks like this crystallized, elastic spider web almost, and it's like connecting and holding everything together. And if you've heard about like meridians, in Eastern medicine, fascia and meridians are kind of synonyms in some ways because we have different diaphragms in our body, and that would be kind of akin to what someone might call a meridian. And that's where there are connectors of the fascia where it can really spread in multiple areas instead of just working on a pinpointed area. If you're working in these kind of fascial, like train stations, you can really access more areas. There's different types of practitioners and people who work with the fascia, and you'll hear different things like myofascial release, and all kinds of different terms, which can be confusing. Same with myofunctional therapy. But they're working with the fascia. And you might hear another buzzword called somatic therapy. Again, when you're doing craniosacral therapy or working with anything in the body that allows it to naturally release emotion, you're doing somatics, you're doing that. And so the fascia in our body is what contracts to protect our body when there's a perceived danger. And now this could be something like a car is coming at you and you think, you're going to get an accident, and then you can feel your body tense up and brace for that. And that's why people who are in like drunk driver accidents, the people who are awake and tense have more injuries, right? And the people who are like, la, da, 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 they're loosey-goosey. They didn't contract. I don't know. But it can hold emotion or physical injury because we contract, we brace ourselves, right? When we're about to have an uncomfortable conversation or we're crying, we have a traumatic experience and then we hold that in our body because that fascia is like protecting us, right? So when someone like a craniosacral therapist, or there's other types of therapists who also work with the fascia, but they do it differently. I won't go off on that tangent just yet. But when a craniosacral therapist who could be a licensed massage therapist tend to train in craniosacral therapy. Chiropractors can train in craniosacral therapy. I teach craniosacral therapy at Beam CST right now, and I have trained IBCLCs, chiropractors, PTs, OTs. Trying to think of those are the main fields that have come in right now. But it's exciting that so many more people like so you can get help with lactation and get CST, because they're starting to see the connection to all these other issues, retained primitive reflexes because of these fascial strains and things like that. Um, but so when you come to see a craniosacral therapist, the way I work is I will see, I'll do my assessment and see where your body wants me to go because your body knows your body best and no matter the symptoms, what it needs. And I'm going to use 5 grams of pressure or less. So that's like a dime in weight. And I'm going to just lightly sink in and kind of see what that fascia wants to do to kind of unwind that pattern. So we all have different patterns in our body. We are comfortable with what we know. So we stay in these patterns, whether they're dysfunctional or not, and we want to survive. So we're going to compensate as best we can and stay in these compensation patterns. That's why we might have, like I have torticollis that I didn't know about, because my parents never took me to CST or any of that as a kid, right? And that's all connected to why I have a twisted pelvis, why I have, and I have these TMJ issues, and I have recessed jaw and all these other things. And it's interesting the more you learn about it, they're like, that makes sense. Oh, it all connects. Oh, and it all goes back to birth. And it goes back to my mother's pelvis and the mother before that and all of that information. It's really interesting. Um, but I've gone a little off topic. So let me know if that answered your question or if I should clarify a little bit more. So basically, we're working with emotions or physical injuries. They could be old or new. And we're following where the body wants us to go. We're making sure that, first of all, this client needs to be in a safe space because if you're not safe, you're going to tighten up and restrict your fascia, right? Because it's protecting your body. So we give our clients space if they are releasing their emotions. You might cry, you might laugh, you might burp, fart. Babies poop all the time. And there's a whole range of emotions and then physical releases as well. And we give space for the uncomfortable ones. So if it's a baby, I give them back to their parent because they're not going to release more fascia if they're crying, right? They need to be in a safe space, work through that release. Um, and so we give time for that and honor that and respect that body's limit. I really like this for babies and new mothers, all mothers, because it's offering that respect, that boundary piece. And it's a way for new parents to learn, oh, this is respectful parenting, like asking for permission with my baby and introducing infant massage to that and understanding that's because of certain birth experiences, a baby may not feel safe for you to touch, their head yet or their chest, and so we need to respect that and their boundaries and slowly make them feel safe until, okay, now you can touch this area and help me feel better there.
And when you're talking about like twisted pelvis and
Mhm.
having birth maybe be more difficult, you can use this type of therapy to fix those things or to at least improve those. Is that correct?
Yes. So, your fascia, like I said, it's connecting and holding everything together, and it's through your whole body. And there's certain fascial lines, for instance, the deep front line, which a lot of people know about because there's that fantastic dissection image online that shows the entire deep front line. It's connecting from the tongue down to your feet. So you have the whole line, and that's how really your mouth is connected to your pelvis. And then, there's that whole gut brain connection and also the mouth brain connection. Um, and so when you're working, if you have a strain in that line, it can twist your pelvis. And so working on that strain can alleviate the pelvis. That's not to say you don't also need pelvic PT, or therapy, because again, emotions create physical, so we hold emotions and it can create physical strain patterns. So that's why it's so important to not forget your emotions. Um, And I don't think any modality is like the end all be all, which is why I keep training in more things because I'm like, this is connected. Oh, and this is a really important piece. So it's a multi-layered approach that I try to take, and I still refer out because you can't. It's a red flag if you're like I can do it all and not refer, you know. But I try to limit like the 20 different people new parents have to go to because it's overwhelming for them. And it's hard to get appointments in, especially in this insurance system. Unfortunately, people are like, why can't you take insurance? Well, because then that's a whole limiting thing. Um, yeah, so I would say I would still tell them, see a pelvic PT. You need to work on breathing. You need to do this, this, and that. But craniosacral therapy can help release if your body's ready for it. You know, your body has to want to release certain things. Um, it can release so much to help with the strain in your pelvis and your mouth and everywhere else.
And what about with primitive reflexes? I'm completely fascinated by these. This is something that you mentioned. Can we use craniosacral therapy for release or for integrating these for ourselves or for our kids?
So again, it's a multi-layered thing. So there are actually different exercise techniques that you do to integrate your primitive reflexes. And craniosacral therapy can help you to release the fascial strains that might be limiting your ability to then perform those exercises so you can try to integrate as an older child or adult. But for a baby, doing craniosacral therapy can help to release those patterns so that you don't end up with the retained reflex. So, for instance, those babies that have they call like the janky crawl, like their knee is up while they're crawling. So they don't ever get that nice cross crawl they're supposed to, and they retain a primitive reflex because of it. Or maybe a baby who was swaddled all the time, so their moro reflex didn't integrate. Um, People might be like, oh, they're fine, but then it shows up later when they're in school and they're having attention difficulties or maybe difficulty writing, all these other things that, they were supposed to layer on one another and now they're presenting.
So if we like bring our baby to somebody like you for a craniosacral therapy, you can prevent those things from possibly happening. But you're saying down the track, if we're noticing our kids or ourselves having some that aren't integrated yet, you can use this in conjunction with, like, say, physiotherapy or other
Yeah.
exercises that help integrate. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's craniosacral therapy is very helpful because if you have a retained reflex, you have a fascial strain that needs to be worked on. And generally, it's occupational therapists who will, take the training and understand primitive reflexes so they can help you with that integration. Some PTs might also do that. I see a lot of crossover, especially in pediatrics, between OTs and PTs sometimes. Um, and yeah. So if there's a fascial strain, it's gonna help. So that way the exercises they're doing can integrate better and you don't have those limiting factors. Also, it's working on your nervous system. So you're not having to go into fight or flight, or maybe you do freeze or, something else when you're working on the primitive reflex integration with them.
Yeah, fascinating. I love how you can use different therapies together to, like, just have such a good outcome.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what's missing for a lot of families is they might go to a great provider, but they don't know that, oh, this other thing should be layered on. Um, because you don't know what you don't know. I keep taking trainings and then I learn about something else. I'm like, oh. And then there's some things I learn about that I want to learn for the families, but it's like out of my price point. So I'll try to find somebody who knows it, but it's hard for these things that are outside like insurance systems. It's the providers are a lot further apart.
Yeah. And you're trained in lactation support and, like, oral ties. What
Yes.
do you want parents to know about this?
My biggest thing when it comes to oral ties is if you suspect there's an oral tie, to have body work first. So this means start doing infant massage with your baby. This is a great thing for caregivers who want to incorporate maybe the big sibling. This is something you can start when you're pregnant with a doll. Get the big sibling excited about this next baby and how they can help, but they're still the baby and not like having to throw away diapers like now they're doing labor instead of feeling loved, so they're part of this loving bonding experience, or, other partner or grandparent. But get somebody who's close to baby doing skin to skin through infant massage because that also fosters communication. You start learning how babies talking, you're getting more eye contact. They're getting that they're smelling you, they're feeling your skin, you're feeling theirs. So there's a serotonin boost or sorry, oxytocin boost, and it's beneficial all around. Um, but aside from that, you're seeing a craniosacral therapist, possibly a pediatric PT, to work on any fascial strains. And the reason for this is we want the fascia to unwind and release because remember, from down to the feet up to the tongue, it's connected. Um, and if there's a thick frenum, let's say there's a tongue tie, they could be cutting into the muscle that's connected to the stomach. So we want to work on the fascial strings so that it's nice and soft and that's a nice thin frenum for a beautiful just laser or cut, how, depending on the provider you're going to. Um, and it's the most optimal release you can get. There's something called baby lays that some providers have, and it's essentially like a quick, it's as if you did CST just in one spot, but only lasts 72 hours. If you don't have a CST near you, at least that's something to help baby and release that tension before they do that release. But it doesn't address the root cause, right? It's only in one spot. And one thing I would like people to know is it's never just the tongue or just the lips or the cheeks. It's the whole body is connected. So a lot of people are like, oh, look at that head shape. I really need to do something with this head. Sometimes that means working down at the feet. Sometimes there's something going on at the pelvis. It's not always directly what you're looking at. And that's the big thing with CST. It's sometimes like someone might have neck pain, but guess what? It's actually stemming from a different area. So we need to listen to what the body says, not what the symptoms say. Although the symptoms usually line up with, what we're doing, inform, but don't let that lead the appointment, so to speak. So, yeah, body work to release the fascial strains. Remember that it's a whole body thing. It's not just the tongue. So just getting that snipped or lasered isn't going to solve your problem. Your baby needs to be able to function. So they need that fascial strain to go away. So that means working with them before and after a release. It means working with either a feeding therapist, that could be an SLP, or sometimes PTs are also feeding therapists, or an IBCLC, depending on your baby's age, or if you're an adult, that means a myofunctional therapist, um, because they need to help you or help baby learn how to strengthen your tongue, your cheeks, your lips. Like it's more than just the part that was lasered. And then like I said, still need the craniosacral therapy for that whole body reconnection and unwinding. Now that that one piece is no longer tight, making everything tight, you can unwind a little bit more, make everything a little bit more release, continue your work. I like to think of it as like a knotted necklace. So you see the knot, you're like, let me undo that knot. And then you see like 20 more knots are actually like underneath it. You're like, well, this is getting out of hand. Now I have even more knots, and you're like, should I give up? And then you try to keep working on it. And then finally, okay, I have one little knot left. You get that, and it's still a little wrinkly, but so you work on that. It's not a linear process. It's definitely multi-layered, and there are many steps, and it's never just like, oh, let me cut that and it's fine. It's also, oh, they'll grow out of it. That no, they'll grow into it is something that a lot of people are saying that I agree with because we compensate to survive. And we get comfortable with our compensation patterns until we are a lot older. And we're like, why am I this way? Why do I have all these problems? Oh my gosh, they were all connected to this. I wish I knew this 20 years ago, right? And I don't want people to have to go through that.
Yeah, it seems
Or,
like it's becoming more common knowledge, but that might just be the little bubble that I live in, that it's
yes.
becoming more common knowledge and it might not actually be out there. I'm not sure, but I appreciate that you are helping families with this and helping babies at a young age so they don't have to realize in adulthood all the problems are connected to this and if have to deal with everything that comes with that.
Yeah. And the other piece that I feel is really important when I work with families is I give home care. And that's something that I didn't used to get when I had my babies. And it's helpful because I'm giving the parents, the families, this is something that you can do with your baby or child, because I have older kids come in, or yourself, between appointments. And so in myofunctional therapy, we give, exercises that people do. But in my practice, I guess you could say, I give people something that involves multiple items in different areas. So it could like touch on emotion. It could touch on, the specific area of the body. It could touch on whole body. It could touch on changing, how maybe you do things to change those patterns because we have routines at home and those routines feed the compensation patterns, right? So I give them different approaches and things that they need to work on between visits, not only so that we can make improvements and then see bigger change between appointments, but so that they don't feel helpless, like they're not able to do anything and that only I am the one, because I am not, I work with the body, not to the body, and that's a big difference. Your body, you know your body best, and you are doing the hard work because when your fascia is releasing or when I'm giving you exercises and having you work on your posture or your breathing or whatever, you are doing that hard work. It's not easy. Um, and I really try to, make sure people know that they are the ones doing this for themselves. And I'm just helping facilitate that. It's hard to do things on your own. It's easier when you have someone to support you along the way and guide you, like, okay, I'm noticing this now in a third person perspective, and updating you. Okay, now let's make this change now that we've done this or that. Um, and so because I give this home care piece that I think is really important, but not everybody gets that, I'm working on home care guides that I can share online as well. So right now I'm working on the Your Baby's Tie Care Bestie is going to be one resource, and then I'm going to do one for torticollis. They go hand in hand, but sometimes there's a solo instance. So then I'll have a torticollis one, and then I have to think on some others, but there'll be like little bite size home care, it'll be PDFs with videos, so people can do these things on their own until they get a provider appointment local to them, so they don't feel like lost and helpless, which is big. Um, by no means does it replace seeing somebody, and I try to drive that home, like, please, please see somebody, and get their professional eyes on your baby, on your child, on yourself. Um, but this way you have something in the meantime because I know here in California, trying to get an appointment, like I'm seeing a public PT right now, I can see her once a month. That's it. And I'm lucky. There's lots of people who are trying to see a provider and everyone's impacted. So hopefully this will be helpful to a lot of families.
Yeah, there's some people that live really far out and remotely. So for them, at least they're getting that knowledge and they can do things themselves and maybe see somebody 6 months down the road or once in a while. But there's a lot of people that just don't have that access, whether it's financially or because of their location. So it's really important that people can do these things themselves, and nothing will ever support getting that one-on-one support, but it is still a great step in that direction.
Definitely.
And you work with parents in helping their baby sleep, like baby-led sleep. How is that different from what we would think of as more like traditional or conventional sleep training?
Yes. So this is interesting because I did this training because I knew that baby sleep is like a big thing for parents. And it would actually bring parents in so I could help them in all these other ways. It's just kind of like smoke and mirrors because really, guess what? Your baby sleep is connected to this other stuff. It's connected to there's a fascial strain. That's why your baby hates the car seat, or why they have reflux, right? There's other things going on. Um, they might have nerve dysfunction. That's why they can't feed. They're swallowing air, all this stuff. Um, so my approach from this baby-led sleep, again, it's understanding that your baby's a person, respecting them, giving, and the fact that they have needs, feeding them when they need to be fed, And it's really a lot of education and a shift in understanding. I don't need to train my baby. I need to think about what is our family ecosystem like? Is this supporting this baby's experience based on their age and development and their needs and maybe like feeding difficulties or whatever else is going on right now with their development that we need to also look at. Maybe we need other referrals. Um, and what's going on with me as a parent? Because if you're an overwhelmed, super stressed parent, you can't pretend that's not affecting your baby and their sleep and your own sleep and the support system you have, right? So all of that comes to play. And so we look at all of those things, and there ends up being, you need a referral here. Let's work on this, work on that. And again, it's one of those things where I'm not going to tell you your baby should be sleeping X, Y, Z, and here's your cookie cutter like sleep plan. No, we're going to have like an hour consult where we talk about things and your goals because that's important. Um, if somebody wants to sleep train, I'm not the person for them. And if they didn't get that from how like my website and everything's set up, then that would be something that's very clear in that consult, how I do things. But we can get them more sleep by making changes to things. Maybe you didn't realize you were rushing, or to do this and that, or your toddler maybe needed more of a routine and schedule so they knew what to expect, or there's different things that we have to look at, and that's the approach that I give. That again, just like everything else, it's all connected. And we need to look at, oh, maybe they have an airway issue, maybe there's a tie. Oh, there's a feeding issue. Maybe you should see an IBCLC. Um, oh, they're in a different room, maybe there's mold, maybe there's this, maybe there's that. And there's so many things it could be other than, well, there's 6 months, here's the routine you should have. And so I think that's really important.
Yeah, I haven't actually heard of many sleep coaches or therapists or whatever people want to call themselves, that actually look at things more so than just the sleep. Like, I love that you're looking at all these other things that we talked about here and how that's impacting on sleep. I think that is very unique and very needed.
Yeah, I mean, we can't pretend, like adults who have sleep apnea. Doesn't that affect their sleep? And that's actually an airway issue, which can also be a structural, like posture issue. And they probably have some deep-rooted traumas, maybe not their own, maybe from a grandparent or great grandparent, who knows, but it's in there, and things that are preventing them from getting good sleep, and, compensation patterns that are holding them there, and diet. Yeah. I mean, people like to say that sleep apnea is a weight related issue, but there was so much there before the weight. Um, and it's a chicken or the egg. Maybe all this caused weight gain, or maybe they don't have a weight gain problem and they still have sleep apnea. Um, that affects your sleep. So when you look at a baby, obviously if they can't sleep, um, we have to look at the conditions around them, not just on forcing them to, look, you're going to do it right now like this. Um, there's so many factors that you have to actually look at.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the holistic approach that you take to so many aspects of postpartum care and motherhood for the mom and for the baby. How do people work with you? Like, is it just in person, it sounds like?
No, so I have virtual consultations, and then obviously then I have to make more referrals because I can't be your craniosacral therapist in person, but I can observe the baby, observe you, you fill out this intake form, so I gain a lot of information. And yeah, so I can do sleep consults virtually. Um, any of, really, I have them separated like this is a sleep, this is a myo feeding, but really it's all of them. I end up looking at everything, which is why I just basically call myself an integrative wellness practitioner because I do these separate things, but they all end up being a part of my appointment, depending on what is going on. So I can do myofunctional therapy kind of virtually. I can help you with sleep virtually. I can't do the craniosacral therapy piece, but I can give you infant massage techniques or just general massage techniques. We can work on Some of the primitive reflexes retained as home care. There's so many things that we can do virtually. And then I have online courses. I have my infant massage course. I'm going to be releasing that your baby's not tongue tie, but your baby's tie care bestie resource, as well as some others. And I'll have like a pre-release sale on that before it comes out in June. And then I have old like virtual events that I hosted that are available as courses. So those are available. And then I'm in person in the Central Valley of California too.
Amazing. And you also have a podcast that you give a lot of this information on as well.
Yes, I have a podcast, the Navigating Parenthood podcast, that I'm on pause right now, but might be starting that up again soon.
Yeah, but there's lots of previous episodes that people can listen to.
Yeah, definitely. I talk about sleep and I think I touch on a little bit of everything we just discussed. And I go on tangents and sometimes I have wonderful guests and that's amazing. And sometimes I don't have guests and it's just me rambling. So if you're okay with listening to my voice, because that's huge when you're listening to a podcast or anything, that can be a limiting factor when you want to like learn information, but you can't listen to a certain voice. So if my voice is not like putting you to sleep or sounds like nails on the chalkboard, then I have a whole podcast with lots of information. We talk about neurodivergence and we talk about oral ties a lot and we talk about craniosacral therapy, talk about how I added myofunctional therapy in, which is like a big thing. I have, it's SLPs don't think RDHs should do it, and then RDHs and SLPs both are like, wait, why are you doing this? So it's an interesting field, and we'll see what changes in it. I have to be careful about what I do and what I don't do. But just I'm continuing to add more things to make sure I have an integrated practice for the families and then referring as needed for sure.
And what ages do you work with? Like, I know a lot of your stuff is like preparing for postpartum and
Yeah.
then babies, but what age would you recommend people generally work with you up until for their children?
So I can work with you if you're trying to conceive. So if you really want to like do as much as you can, to help yourself and help your children beforehand. Um, because myofunctional therapy and working on your pelvis and your mouth is gonna it's gonna be so beneficial to you and being able to breathe while you're pregnant, more oxygen to your brain, more oxygen to your baby, just all these things, and better for your birth. But so I can work with you. I focus on women and children. So if you're thinking of conceiving or you're pregnant or you're in the postpartum years, so even decades after postpartum, really. Um, but I really love that just sweet spot early, first year postpartum, pregnancy, baby period. But I can still work with kids. I would say probably up to age 10 because everyone's good with different age kids. And I think I'm better with younger kids than I am teenagers. Um, but if you're like, no, I think my teenager really needs you, I'm not gonna like turn you away. So I work with kids, babies, and mothers.
Amazing. And where can people find you?
So I'm at navigatingparenthood.com and then Navigating Parenthood on Instagram, on Pinterest, if you love Pinterest. And you'll find some interesting things for me because, like I said, I started out as like a content parenting website and then transformed into this wellness practitioner. So I have a hodgepodge of things available there, different resources and takes on things. Um, and then my podcast is on Spotify and Apple, and it's Navigating Parenthood. And there's two, but you'll see mine with my picture. So there's like a Australian Navigating Parenthood that was a podcast for teens that ended years ago, and then there's mine.
Well, thank you so much for all that you do for families, for moms, and for babies and kids, and for your time here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me and letting me ramble on and talk with you about all of this because it's just so important, and I really hope that it was helpful to somebody listening.